want to see something freaky, we'll take a look at some old footage. This is from the Theodore Brill's assisted living community, and it's security footage from back in the 80s. This camera would just kind of generally face this hallway, but one night it caught something very eerie in this particular frame. Before we get into it, I have got to say thank you to you for making my podcast, Creep Time the Podcast, number 18 in the whole country. I'm very grateful. So if you have not listened to Creep Time the Podcast, go click the link in my bio. If you look to the background of this footage, on the right there appears to be an elderly woman just standing there. What really kind of freaked everybody out is that everybody recognized this woman. The staff could tell that this was Blanche Raymond. The problem is, Blanche Raymond died 2 years earlier in 1984. Still, the consensus from the staff is that the footage clearly shows who they recognize to be this woman. Just feasibly no explanation for it. How do we explain this footage? I would preface this story that a photo like this is my actual worst nightmare. It's Julie Watts and her husband Jonathan, and on December 2nd, 2017, Julie was home alone when her phone pinged, detecting motion in the downstairs camera. This was the frame that was shown on her phone. Before we dive in, if you're a fan of true crime, make sure to go click the link in my bio to listen to my podcast, Creep Time the Podcast, on Spotify or Apple. She saw this photo and she immediately jumps into action. She locks her bedroom door, she calls 911, she starts texting her husband Jonathan, who's all the way in Minneapolis on business. After a few minutes, she gets another alert on her phone that there was motion detected in the downstairs bedroom. This was the photo sent to her phone. I know it's hard to see, but if you flip this picture upside down, it is somebody who is back crawling out of a closet. Julie did not survive this attack, as when police arrived, they came upon a gruesome display where Julie's hands had been taken. Police had no idea who could have done this. This was the final text exchange that was surfaced from her phone. I know it's dark, I know it's bedtime, but does something feel kind of strange with this photo? Alright, so this picture was taken by Bonnie Mathis. She was a backpacker who was staying in the White Rose Hostel in Germany in 2014. She took this photo outside of her room to send to her boyfriend after she was repeatedly hearing noises from the hallways, having not even realized what it was she caught. Before we jump in, I have got to say thank you to you guys for listening to my podcast, Creep Time the Podcast. You made us the 18th top true crime podcast in the entire country. That's a big deal. Thank you for listening, and if you haven't already, please go click the link in my bio. Now, don't forget, Bonnie was backpacking alone through this, and she stopped contacting her family. Eventually, that brings German police back to the hostel where she was last seen. Reporting I saw, she was found to be partially eaten, but it didn't make sense because her bedroom door was still locked from the inside. Then they found this photo, finding this. Someone had been watching her from inside the walls. I tried to enhance the picture, but no one knows who this was. The question that has long plagued police is, what do we make of the McGrady tapes? So back in 2001, at a Blockbuster in McGrady, North Carolina, a car drove by in the parking lot and just dropped a tape outside of the building. So employees saw that and they went outside to get the tape, and they were like, who would drop a tape off like that? Until they looked at it and they noticed something was wrong. This was the tape that was recovered from the parking lot, and it was completely unlabeled. According to the story, they took it to the back room where they were able to play it back, and this was the footage they found. It is a 40-minute video of a person's face looking under what looks like a bathroom stall, and it's completely silent, like straight uncut 40 minutes of this and the cameraman just breathing heavily while they videotape this. Management turned the tape over to police, and the strangest part is that a search canine signaled that the tape had traces of human decomp on it. To this day, whoever's behind the McGrady tape is a mystery. And I genuinely mean nothing could give me any chills like this photo. So this picture that I sourced, it came from the Elderwood Bed and Breakfast that's located in Louisiana, and it was taken by this woman right here, Meredith Den, and sent to her husband. It's the middle of the night and she's hearing things down the hallway, so she took this picture and sent it to her husband, not even realizing what she caught in the frame. But before we get into it, if you're not already, please make sure to go check out my podcast, the creepiest one you know, Creep Time the Podcast. I've got the link in the bio, and it's available on Spotify and Apple. Now, in the background of this photo, she had captured something that most people find very difficult to explain. If you look to the top left of the photo, there is a figure that is watching her from the stairs. And it's not even clear from this photo if what she captured was an actual person who was watching her, because I feel like she would have seen them. But I don't know, the closer you get to this photo, the more unnerving it becomes, because it almost looks like somebody with their full jaw unhinged. It could easily be one of the most haunting Polaroids I think I've ever seen. Now, the Polaroid was captured and then later developed after Jonah Sullivan went missing. unnerving. It didn't take long for investigators, once they developed it, to realize the same thing that you're probably realizing. There's something in this picture. But before we get into it, if you are a fan of all things chilling, mysterious, and unexplained, please go check out my podcast, Creep Time the Podcast. Go click the link in my bio and you can listen on Spotify or Apple. Now, to preface where the picture came from, Jonah was actually an explorer, and he would typically explore abandoned buildings, one of them being the Gershwin Schoolhouse, which was abandoned in the late 70s and no one knew why, and he went in 1999. After he never came back, police went searching, where they found the Polaroid camera, but not him. The final picture caught on the camera was eventually developed, which showed someone in the background near the desks. If you zoom into the picture, you would see that Jonah was not alone in that room. An attempt would be made to digitally enhance the picture, and this was the result. I already know this video is going to show up at night for you. I don't care. You tell that there is something deeply wrong with this photo. It was discovered in a hidden lockbox after her grandfather had passed, and the woman who found it, Michaela Jerome, she thought the same thing that you did. There's something that's kind of off about this picture. Very quickly, if you're not already, make sure to go check out my podcast, The Scariest One You Know, Creep Time the Podcast. You can use the link in my bio. We're on Spotify and Apple. Well, the photo, she was almost sure, clearly showed the staircase of her family home, but she couldn't be sure about what this was in the center until she enhanced the photo. A hauntingly clear image of what appears to be a woman clawing her way up those stairs. She eventually turned in this photo for analysis with the police, and it took them 4 months, but they determined that this was more than likely a scenario of captivity. If her grandfather did take this picture, he had this woman in his possession. Still, nobody would even know who she was. I want to talk about this photo. Pictured here is middle schooler Jean McCoy at her friend Meredith Wan's house after school. What kind of looks like a very innocent photo of maybe just two girls hanging home alone after school, it actually captured something very sinister in the background. Both Jean and Meredith were attacked in this home by an intruder who they happened to catch on camera. The story, the man was never caught, and they were both viciously strangled, with only one of them surviving, which is how we got the witness testimony. And I combed through police archives to try to find this sketch, and although the sketch was produced, the man was never recognized. It was never helpful. The chances that they were able to catch the culprit on camera just about a moment before he attacked is just unnerving. Let's talk about this picture. Now, the picture was captured by Daniel Hill, who was the custodian at Driftville Elementary. If you look to the back of the photo, you can already kind of spot that something is very off. What the custodian had thought was maybe a student who had stayed after school and was trying to prank him in the dark turned out to be something much worse. Daniel Hill was attacked in that hallway and did not survive the attack, with his body being found the following morning by a student. He was described to be found on the floor with lacerations so severe he no longer had eyes and his nose was missing. So police eventually turned back to the final photo that was taken on his phone to try to enhance it, to figure out who would have done this. This was about the clearest version that they could make of that photo, and the man seen here was never found, and his motive towards Daniel was never known. This is one of the most mysterious things that has ever happened in the abandoned town of Stonebrook. So Stonebrook was this town that was historically really dependent on mining, but once that industry kind of got up and left, almost 100% of the town's population followed. But there were still security cameras that were left over. CCTV cameras that were left over from the late 90s started to capture and transmit what appeared to be a single person who was living in that town. And what's really eerie about this footage is that they're mostly seen alone, but they're just kind of standing there. They're not really doing anything or looking anywhere. Eventually, those cameras started to transmit two people, and the footage just got eerier because I don't even know how to explain the context of a photo like this. Still, all of this footage is very far away, right? We never really got a close-up shot of that original person until we got this in 2001. This added to the haunting collection of footage of the unknown person in that town. To this day, the lone resident of Stonebrook kind of remains this haunting relic of a forgotten city. Let's talk about this picture. So this is a still that was actually captured from video footage that was taken by Project Ghost Town, and if you look to the top of the staircase, you'll notice there's something wrong with the photo. But to bring you this episode of Creep Time, I am partnering up with Spyfly. This is the site for running background reports. If you're getting insights for safety purposes, property, or even reverse phone lookups, Spyfly is perfect for vetting first dates, even if you want to reconnect with long-lost loved ones. Make sure to check the link in my bio, sign up for Spyfly today. This group, they went to go visit a town called DeMerrill, which is really infamous because back in the day, everybody left this town on the same day. Nobody ever knew why. While exploring abandoned houses, they started taking video and caught this. They looked at the footage and they looked at the top of the staircase and realized what they had caught was an unknown face. Despite them claiming they searched the house and they were sure they were alone, the footage has largely gone unexplained. Is it haunting the reason everybody left DeMerrill back in the day? I'm losing my mind over this. This could actually be a picture of the Lone Rock woman. There are these long-standing legends of Lone Rock Beach of a murderous woman who roams the beach at night and she goes after campers. These police descriptions of a woman with wild hair and these menacing eyes, but it's always just kind of been a story. There was never really any proof of this until a phone turned up on the beach. So 3 teenagers found an iPhone that was abandoned in the sand, and before they turned it in, they did what anybody would do. They would browse the camera roll. They ended up finding this unnerving photo of a woman who clearly took this photo with the self-timer, and she roughly seemed to match the description. When police eventually turned the phone back to the owner, they did not recognize the woman, and nobody else on that beach the day that the photo was taken seemed to spot her, leaving us with the question, could this be the only known photo of the murderous woman of Lone Rock Beach? You wanted to know more about Cherie Glenn, and I found you more. This was the leaked booking photo of Cherie Glenn, one of America's most infamous cannibals from the 80s. So much of her story in these case records had been sealed from the public because it was deemed too disturbing to print. Even this booking photo, it was sealed. This is a leak. They did have somebody submit another leaked photo of this photo. It's just from a closer angle. Like I said, there's not really much that's publicly known because so much of her case was actually sealed. The rumors of the story was that the case was so bizarre and so horrific in the cannibalistic practices that it was difficult at the time to find a jury that could stand it. Descriptions of not only her consuming victims, but forcing victims to consume parts of her. Somebody also reached out and tracked down what they think might be a yearbook photo of her from the 70s. By no means is it 100% confirmed, but it does look really similar to her. It's 100% in the eyes. What do you think makes this picture so disturbing to look at? This is a real photo of the Hiroshima shadows. It's the last trace of the exact spot where this person stood in Hiroshima, Japan. This is exactly as they were at 8:16 a.m. August 6, 1945, as the atomic bomb detonated over the city. It's like looking at their last moment here that's burned into the stone. Why even tell you this story? Why bring up a nuclear attack? Well, experts would tell us that the risks are rising, partly because of what you're using to watch this video. Literally as simple as a computer or your phone. Computers are vulnerable to these increasingly sophisticated cyber attacks, and as more and more computers are integrated into the worldwide nuclear system, they are also susceptible to cyber attacks. Even just technical errors have brought humanity to a nuclear brink in the past, and in today's cyber age, there's no telling when humanity's luck is going to run out. More people, elected leaders who can become aware of the threat of hacked nukes, the less likely we will ever see a picture like this again. So I found something on the internet that most people have not seen. This is the only known photo of Cherie Glenn. This is a leaked booking photo. It's from like back in the 80s when she was one of the most famous cannibals in the US before she was caught by police. The reason the photo was leaked is because at the time, her appearance was considered so disturbing for most people that it was decided that they would conceal her booking photo as well as her interrogation footage. Even the nature of her crimes is not public information that was also sealed in the affidavit, as it was described as highly grotesque and complex. Even today, there's not much public information that's known about where she's being held, and that leaked photo is the only image that has ever been seen of one of America's most terrifying women. I think a lot about the story behind this picture. No matter how many times I tell it, it's still chilling. In the 18th district of Hong Kong in the early 2000s, this picture was captured outside of an apartment window. What the news articles described was that witnesses saw her, she appeared to be having some kind of psychotic episode, and they thought that was the end of it. It was just a midday bizarre disruption. What they didn't know was that this person would become the primary suspect in one of the worst murders the 18th district would ever see. Roughly 40 minutes, maybe after that picture was taken, and about 2 miles from the location, a family home of 9 was broken into with only 1 person surviving that attack. Now, the sole survivor of the attack was able to give a witness testimony to the police. This is the only photo they've ever run of the suspect on television, but what he described she did almost sounded inhuman. Breaking bones, ripping people's jaws open with her bare hands, even a report that she tried to eat people. This frame is the only one we got of her. Let's talk about this picture. Captured by a student athlete who was only publicly named in this story as Jason M. He was staying after school when he caught this in his high school hallway. He thought he was hearing noises in the hallway, that maybe a friend of his was pranking him, but he had no idea what he had captured. But before we get into this, a huge shout out to the sponsor of today's video, the podcast Civil. They're a duo that's focusing not on murder trials, but on civil trials that are taking place within the justice system. Catch them anywhere that you get your podcasts. Now, for the photo that Jason had captured, at first glance it looks like nothing but maybe a dark hallway, until he was found strangled and police turned to his camera roll. Cropped in, if you look to the far right of the picture, police believe that he may have captured his attacker, who they think was a woman, but her motive remains unknown. Witness reports of those who were near the school around the attack would would link to this police sketch of the unknown woman. There were some digital trails found on Jason's phone that could have suggested he was in with a bad crowd, but this is the closest evidence we've got to a picture. Let's talk about this picture. It was captured by Amanda Clark in 2017 when she was walking by the window of her ski cabin and she saw what appeared to be a man staring back at her. I'm just gonna say a huge shout out to today's sponsor of this video, Solo.to. Solo.to is like your one-stop shop for linking your socials, your website, anything you want right in your bio, and I've been using them for like well over a year at this point. I think their linking service is like the #1 driver for Creep Time the podcast, so definitely check them out. Now, that photo that Amanda captured was sent directly to her boyfriend, saying that there was this man trying to stalk the cabin. However, she was gonna run into the same issue she would with trying to call 911. There is no service in the mountains. She could sense there was something deeply wrong with this situation. The man was just staring at her through the window. She had no idea what his intentions were, till he darted towards the house and tried to pry open the downstairs window. Luckily, he never got in, and the boyfriend did eventually return. They contacted police, and that's how we got this sketch. But that man was never caught. One of the scariest lockdown photos I have ever seen in my life. On April 16th, 2010, in Newcastle High School, they went into a lockdown procedure. Somebody comes over the intercom, and they say that there are reports of a dangerous individual who's inside the school. When this happens, Angela Germain just stays in place. She stays in the girls' bathroom, and she ends up sending this blurry photo to her friend Kelly, and she's like, I've got to stay in here, oh my god. What she didn't realize was that when she sent that picture, in the dimmed emergency lights of that bathroom, she had captured the intruder who was hiding behind the end stall. But by the time her friend even notices the face and tells teachers and police and they get to the bathroom, Angela was found stabbed more than 15 times, having later succumbed to those injuries. Because of Angela's final photo and 2 other witnesses in the school, they do make a composite sketch, but they would never find this person. The only thing that we have left is the final frame in her camera roll. And if you are loving Creep Time, make sure to go follow on Insta. This is an update video on everything that police are saying on the University of Idaho case. 4 students were found in an apartment building in what has been named the worst stabbing in the town's history. At this point, more than a week has passed, and the people of this town and the families don't have a suspect, and they don't even actually know where the weapon is, but police do believe it was similar to what's shown here. What we do know now is that police are saying the 2 roommates who were found alive are completely out of suspicion. It's believed they slept through the whole thing. Police also know that Xana might have been the only one who was conscious when she was attacked, as she was the only one found with significant defensive wounds. From reports that I'm seeing, anyone who was in or around that food truck is no longer in suspicion. The new location where police are fixating on is this 3 to 6 a.m. window in the back parking lot. You can see it right here. It's very wooded, it's secluded, and it has a very clear path to the apartment. Police are also saying they no longer believe the dog that was found skinned 3 weeks earlier is connected to this case. I think that's everything that the public knows, and we're all just waiting on additional details. Something is going on at the University of Idaho. Okay, so if you haven't heard about this story, police responded to a 911 call of this house where they said there was 1 person inside who was unconscious. When they get there, there are 4 students inside who were stabbed and deceased, like the entire house was a bloodbath. It was literally pooling out the sides of the foundation. You can look up pictures of this. These are the 4 students who were found in the home, and we think that the stabbings took place sometime between maybe 3 to 4 in the morning on Sunday. We just don't know why. They actually posted this picture on Instagram earlier that day, like all 4 of them were friends. We even have security footage of them around like 1 a.m., like 2 hours before these stabbings, where they're out getting food, and the cashier said they were fine, like not in distress. 2 of the other roommates who are alive, the ones who called 911, they were in the home at the time of the stabbings and did not call 911 for 8 hours. There's a lot more that's gonna come from this story. Caution before I actually show you this picture, because this story is true. This is the police sketch of who has been named as the Cape Intruder. All of this dates back to 2005 in Cape Elizabeth, Maine, where there was a person who looks like this, who was reportedly breaking into people's homes and watching them sleep. Like, people described that they would wake up, right, in the early mornings, and the first thing they would see was this man standing in their room, and the second they saw him, he would just bolt, like run out of the house. He never killed anybody, he never stole anything, he just like watched people. And the last recorded break-in was around February 2006, when he suddenly seemed to stop, and they never caught this guy. What's ironic and kind of disturbing about the photo is that he is a watcher, and it almost feels like when you're looking at it, he's watching you. And as always, if you're loving Creep Time, make sure to go follow on Insta. What to you looks wrong with this picture? Before we get into this picture, I'm just going to preface that the woman who took this, Eliza Sherman, she was not harmed, but this was possibly the riskiest photo that she may have ever taken. After repeatedly hearing her doorbell rung, she assumed that it was probably a prank, like kids or something who were in her apartment building. While this woman was texting her husband and describing what was happening, she sent this picture of what she thought was an empty hallway, saying that every time she opens the door, there's no one there. Except she was wrong. In the dark at the end of that hallway was not a kid playing a prank. It was a man who had been ringing her bell. It's actually her husband who caught this, and he ends up calling it out. They call police, and they take the photo and they digitally enhance it. But even with a clearer visual, whoever this was, they do not know. He could have been someone who lived in the apartment building. He could have been someone who broke into the apartment building. And as always, if you're loving Creep Time, make sure to go follow on Insta. You guys had an intense reaction to the last photo I showed you, so I found you another one. This one, I feel like you might be able to immediately pick apart what's wrong with this picture. The sourcing on this is a little murky, although it's believed to have been captured at the Fall Ridge Academy boarding school for girls in the basement hallway. So the girl who took this picture, it's believed that she thought her friends were following her through this hallway, so she took the picture thinking it was a prank to send to the group chat, not realizing what she had caught. A sort of eerie presence that she was picking up on was of a man who was hiding behind this classroom door, and you can see his face in the window. And if we get even closer, you can really see those features in the window. She was attacked by the man shortly after this, and although it would be hours before she was found critical but survived, which is how we got a police composite. To this day, this still remains as the only visual of the person who was hiding in that basement. And if you guys are loving Creep Time, make sure to go follow on Insta. I am telling you, doing night security, it's gotta be one of the scariest jobs. Okay, so this photo right here, this was captured by Michael Hostin on the third floor bathroom of a Dallas shopping mall. The reason he took it was because he's night security and he heard noises coming from this bathroom, but he was nervous to check the actual stalls, so he sends a picture to his coworker. After he sent the picture, he eventually leaves the bathroom, but then gets a text where his coworker says, "Keep your weapon drawn and call for backup." He had no idea what he was talking about until he increased the brightness of this picture. It's not easy to see in the dark, but with the photo enhanced and slightly brightened, you can see somebody peeking over the top of that middle stall. Someone was in there, looking directly at him as he searched the bathroom. But even with a visual, by the time backup eventually came, whoever this was, they were gone. Left with this picture. And if you're loving Creep Time, make sure to go follow on Insta. Does something seem a little off about this photo? Danielle Berner, she's at work, her kids are at school, and she gets a ring notification saying that there was motion detected in her daughter's bedroom. It's like virtually impossible to tell that anything's even wrong with this picture. I couldn't even tell that there was something wrong with it until I looked at the bottom right of that bed. There's someone hiding under her daughter's bed. And unfortunately, she didn't catch this either, so she would end up coming home that evening after work. By the time her daughters got back from school, they were the first to find the remains of their mother. And even with this, a digitally enhanced version of the footage provided by police, they have never found who it was who was under that bed. And if you are loving Creep Time, make sure to go follow on Insta. Would never stick around in a school library at night, and this is the exact reason. This picture was captured by Jalen Nell. She was in her school library, and this is the entrance point, and she's in there at like 2 something in the morning, and she thought she was completely alone. Until she realized that there was another woman in this library, and she was being watched. She ends up deciding to leave because she feels uncomfortable, but before she does, she takes this photo of the entrance to send to her friend and tell her about this creepy woman. But I want to look at this photo a little closer. In the frame, she had unknowingly captured the woman who is staring directly at the camera. This visual is chilling. Jalen would actually end up reporting this incident to Student Affairs, who then checked the camera footage at the entrance of the library. What really unnerved them is that when they looked at the footage, they never saw this person leave the library. And if you guys are loving Creep Time, make sure to go follow on Insta. Why is found footage always this creepy? If you don't know the story of Shannon Barlow and the footage that she caught, she was a pretty well-known documentary filmmaker in the early 2000s right outside of North Carolina. She very famously went into the abandoned hospital in City Center where she would film her last video. She never returned from that hospital, so police went searching and they found her camera and focused on the footage where they selected this frame. I looked at it and I'm like, why this frame? What is important about it? And if you look to the background on the right, you'll see it. In the right doorway of this hallway, there is a man who is watching her as she filmed this. Despite an investigation, her remains were never found, but there was evidence of a struggle, so it suggested that she didn't survive this. The enhanced video footage is the only visual that we have of who is believed to be her assailant. And if you guys are loving Creep Time, make sure that you go follow on Insta. Do you ever see a picture that just makes your stomach drop? This is a still from an alert that a woman named Alexis Randall got on her phone. It's from a security camera that was set up in her living room, but she's looking at this and she's thinking the same thing you are. She's like, what's wrong with the picture here? Why did the motion detector go off? But then look a bit closer, specifically at the bathroom door. This man who was staring at the camera from the doorway. She spots this picture and she immediately panics and calls the police, but by the time they get there, this guy is gone. What really freaked her out even more is that when police got there, they found evidence that the bathroom window had been tampered with. Further security footage would show that the man had crawled through the bathroom window the night before and was hiding in the hallway bathroom all through the night, even while she was in the house. And if you guys are loving Creep Time, make sure to go follow on Insta. The strangest feelings that I can imagine is just feeling like your reality isn't very real. There's a very strange event that took place in Duluth, Minnesota in 1988 where every single TV in this town turned on by itself at the exact same time. This was the image that flashed on the screen for exactly 4 minutes. It did move, and what's even eerier is that it actually spoke and would repeatedly say it was stuck between realities. It happened in like every single household, and it was quick, but there were some people who were able to get pictures of their screens. At some point, everybody thought this was some kind of elaborate prank until this happened. State troopers and government officials came into Duluth and privately removed TVs from almost every household and then compensated everybody, and nobody really knew why. State officials would eventually claim this was for security reasons, but a lot of people questioned, was this a prank, or was this something else?
Creepy serial killers you didn't know about. Jeffrey Dahmer was an American serial killer and sex offender who killed and dismembered 17 men and boys between 1978 and 1991. Many of his later murders involved necrophilia, cannibalism, and the permanent preservation of body parts, typically all or part of the skeleton. Although he was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, schizotypal personality disorder, and a psychotic disorder, Dahmer was found to be legally sane at his trial. He was convicted of 15 of the 16 homicides he had committed in Wisconsin, and was sentenced to 15 terms of life imprisonment on February 17, 1992. Dahmer was later sentenced to a 16th term of life imprisonment for an additional homicide committed in Ohio in 1978. On November 28, 1994, Dahmer was beaten to death by Christopher Scarver, a fellow inmate at the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Wisconsin. Creepy urban legends you didn't know about. Colorado Riverdale Road. Riverdale Road is one of the most haunted roads in the U.S. There are a lot of different stories about this road. There's stories of a phantom Camaro with one headlight out, a woman in white, street signs with dried blood that change day to day, and bodies seen hanging in the trees during the full moon. A man lost his mind and burned his mansion down with his family inside. The gates to his home. They call the gateway to hell. If you're brave enough to get out of your car and go through the gates, there's an underground chicken coop with strange writing that was used to summon demons. There's a story about a ghost jogger who died on Joggers Hill. If you pull over on the side of the road, you can hear someone running, handprints will appear on your windows, and you can hear tapping on the side of your car. Albert Fish wrote a letter to Grace Bud's mother saying, "My dear Mrs. Budd, in 1894, a friend of mine shipped as a deckhand on the steamer Tacoma, Cap John Davis. They sailed from San Francisco to Hong Kong, China. On arriving there, he and 2 others went ashore and got drunk. When they returned, the boat was gone. At that time, there was a famine in China. Meat of any kind was from $1 to $3 a pound. So great was the suffering among the very poor that all children under 12 were sold to the butchers to be cut up and sold for food in order to keep others from starving. A boy or girl under 14 was not safe in the street. You could go in any shop and ask for steak, chops, or stew meat. Part of the naked body of a boy or girl would be brought out and just what you wanted cut from it. A boy or girl's behind, which is the sweetest part of the body and sold as veal cutlet, brought the highest price. John stayed there so long he acquired a taste for human flesh. On his return to NY, he stole two boys 17111, took them to his home, stripped them naked, tied them in a closet, then burned everything they had on. Several times every day and night he spanked them and tortured them to make their meat good and tender. First he killed the 11-year-old boy because he had the fattest ass and of course the most meat on it. Every part of his body was cooked and eaten except head, bones, and guts. He was roasted in the oven, all of his ass boiled, broiled, fried, stewed. The little boy was next, went the same way. At that time I was living at 490 100th Street, rear right side. He told me so often how good human flesh was I made up my mind to taste it. On Sunday, June the 3rd, 1928, I called on you at 406 W15th Street. Brought you pot cheese and strawberries. We had lunch. Grace sat in my lap and kissed me. I made up my mind to eat her. On the pretense of taking her to a party, you said yes, she could go. I took her to an empty house in Westchester I had already picked out. When we got there, I told her to remain outside. She picked wildflowers. I went upstairs and stripped all my clothes off. I knew if I did not, I would get her blood on them. Creepy fact you didn't know about. Studies suggest your brain doesn't necessarily stop all of its activity the moment you are clinically dead, as was the case with one patient where up to 30 minutes of brain activity was recorded after death. You might literally hear yourself be declared dead. Sad facts you didn't know about. During the 9/11 tragedy, Bill Biggert, the photographer of the shot above, documented the fall of the first tower with his camera and refused to leave the scene. The last person he spoke to was his wife on the cell phone. Before the second tower collapsed on him, his body and belongings were discovered 4 days later, and this image was his last shot. Creepy fact you didn't know about. Serial killer Robert Hansen abducted his victims and then flew them all the way to his very isolated cabin in the Alaskan mountains. He then released them and then hunted them like wild animals, with a knife and his semi-automatic rifle. Interesting facts you didn't know about. While filming Tokyo Drift, the crew couldn't get a permit to film a scene in Shibuya. They filmed it anyway, and the studio hired a fall guy to claim to be the director and spend a night in jail. Scary facts you didn't know about. Friends noticed that Danielle Harkins, a 35-year-old school teacher near St. Petersburg, Florida, started acting strangely in June of 2012, developing an interest in demonic rituals. Danielle Harkins told the kids as they were gathered around a small fire near St. Petersburg Pier that they needed to rid their bodies of demons by cutting their skin to let the evil spirits out, then burning the wounds to ensure they can't return. Harkins doused one teen's hand with perfume and set it on fire. The boy suffered second-degree burns. Another was cut with a broken bottle on the neck. Harkins cauterized the wounds with a small key she heated with fire. After she was arrested, the students never spoke about the event or commented on the arrest.